Concrete walls have never been easier. Watch how we transform this ordinary wall into a custom concrete finish. With endless designs, colors, textures, finishes, sky's the limit. Enjoy the video.
Come on. Come on. We're going to do a concrete wall with an integrated logo. Looks like it's inset or recessed into the concrete. And then what we're gonna do is integrate that concrete wall into our pattern on the floor. So the first thing we need to do is kind of prep the wall, get the wall ready, and then we're gonna put a background for the decal to be laid on. So the first thing we're gonna do is pull this trim. I'm gonna tape off the whole perimeter of this wall, everything, just so I can kind of have the wall framed in by tape, so I don't get overlay on everything. Then I'm gonna find out where I want this logo. It's pretty big, it's about 4 feet tall. So it's gonna roll down the wall, kind of cover the whole middle of the wall. I'm just going to frame out the area where I want the logo, the decal, and I'm actually going to paint on our RWD Primer in black. What that's going to do is give me an epoxy-like substrate. I'm gonna let it completely set up so it's not tacky, so it'll be extremely smooth like epoxy, and then the decal will set on that. And the goal is that the decal will then peel off of that easily. So that's the goal, and now you'll be able to see the process. Now we're gonna roll on our RWD Primer. This is our RWD Primer in black. And since it is a water-based epoxy, you have two benefits. Number one, it has the epoxy part of it, so it's extremely durable, great adhesion, and it finishes somewhat gloss, which is what we want. Then you have the benefit of the water, which evaporates, so it's zero VOCs, doesn't smell, isn't bad for you in any way because there's no solvents evaporating from it. So we de-shed our roller, and we mixed up a little bit. Now we're just gonna roll it in between our tape here, because this is where the decal is going to go. You can do this with a 9-inch roller. I'm doing it with a 6-inch roller, and we mixed up a countertop kit amount that'll do about 50 square feet. This is not 50 square feet, but we can actually do a couple coats on it if we need to. I'm using a 3/8-inch nap roller. You can use a 1/2-inch roller if you have a lot of texture on your wall. 3/8-inch seems to be working fine on this. As this sets up, I'll probably roll over it again really quick, just in case there's any of the paint showing from the wall. All right, we'll give this a few minutes to get a little bit drier, start setting up, and then we may hit it one more time if we see any white coming through, but I think it's pretty good. Okay, so we've rolled this primer on, and you can tell it's actually still wet, but I want to pull this tape before the primer dries so that it doesn't attempt to try to peel some of that primer up. I want a good bond, and I want the edges to be pretty crisp like that, and you'll see why later. But I'm just going to peel those off. It's also why it's important to do one piece of tape if you can, all the way around the area that you want to do the primer or wherever you're going to put the logo decal on. Makes it a lot easier to deal with when you're pulling tape. And the only part of the tape that I really push down is just the inside edge. The rest of it's all pretty loose. So we put this decal over the black WB primer, and The decal is black, but really we just want to pull the decal after the wall is completely covered in concrete overlay to expose the black primer below it. And what we're doing now is we're just putting some filament tape. You can do any other type of tape as well over parts of the logo, so that after 3 coats of concrete overlay, we can find the logo again. Because these decals are so skinny, so thin, that we wouldn't be able to locate it underneath all the coats of the concrete overlay. So we're just putting a little bit extra tape so we'll be able to notice it and it'll pop through the concrete overlay. That's all we're doing. So we're just giving ourselves little ideas of where it is. All these letters down here, these 2 parts of the logo right there, and that's what we're doing right now. I might frame out these things, and then what we'll do is we'll actually take a picture when we're all done to give ourselves an idea of what's going on underneath that overlay in case we forgot. So that's all we're doing here, is just giving ourselves a little bit easier way to find the decal. When you're taking off the ceiling to do a concrete wall, you want to be off of the actual wall between 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch. You want to give yourself plenty of room to be able to pull that tape once you have all the layers done. So notice the gap that we have right here at the top of the wall. That's about the size of the gap that you want. And I'm going to be doing a couple layers of tape, and I want to make sure that I push in that inside edge really well. And I'm going to do 2 layers because when we're rolling, I don't want it to touch the ceiling. I want to minimize touch up on the ceiling. So I'm going to tape off the whole ceiling. We did this wall. Since we're going to coat the floor tomorrow, I'm not as worried about the floor. We'll just scrape up all the excess overlay. But notice everything you don't want coated really needs to be taped off. Like that's taped off. This over here is taped off. We're gonna do a little bit more tape there. And then this wall right here will tape off. So we're just coating this wall. What we're going to do now is roll on our prep replacement primer, which bonds to basically anything. So it's a great primer to use to go over painted walls like we're doing here. Almost everyone deals with painted walls, so our primer bonds extremely well to painted walls to allow our concrete overlay to bond to the wall without peeling off. So Tyler's cutting in the edges for me, and then I'm just gonna roll the wall, because we don't have a lot of texture, we just have a 3/8 inch snap roller. We de-shed the roller already, and we're gonna roll this primer on extremely thin. Looks like milk. It's not milk. Notice how far this primer's going? I've just dipped it once, and it's probably gonna do close to half of this wall. That's how far this goes. So I'm gonna do the top half, and then take the pull off, and do the bottom half where I can reach. And when we're rolling out this primer, we'll give it a couple minutes, and then if we see it separating in places, we'll just continue to roll over it and fill in those points of separation. All right, we're putting on the first coat of concrete overlay. Now it's very messy, so we roll it on the wall and then we hit it flat with a squeegee, with a magic trowel. So you can see it's all over the floor, which is fine because we're going to get ready to clean. We're going to get ready to do the floor tomorrow. So you can kind of see the process.
15, 20 minutes. I'm just going back and knocking off any runs or anything. And we got a little thin spot here, so I'll just add get a little product on there. And then we'll just flatten that off. So any spots that look like drippy or anything, we just flatten them off. And it doesn't matter about all these tears because our second coat will cover those in and it won't do that after it has a textured surface to go over. But that'll minimize a lot of sanding or the next day if you guys have to.
So it's the next day and we scraped the wall because the crushed marble, the aggregate within our overlay, is somewhat pokey, and so what we did is we just took a standard trowel and we just scraped the wall to knock off all the tips. And what that does is it allows the second coat to just go on a lot easier. And then we're gonna sand that coat and then do our scratch coat. But basically we're getting ready for our second texture coat on this wall. So we scraped it, and now we're gonna do the same process. Roll it on, and then knock it down with a magic trowel.
Okay, second coat about to go down. We've already hydrated. We gotta hydrate now because we have a porous surface from the first coat, so it's gonna suck all the moisture out of our second coat unless we hydrate. So we've already hydrated. I'm gonna cut in my edge just like I did on the first coat because I can't get a roller back in there. So I'm gonna do that right now, and then we'll just do the same thing we did on the first coat. And you'll notice it's not gonna scratch and tear like it did on that first coat, all these marks, because it has something porous and textured we're going on instead of like a smooth decal or a painted wall that's been primed. So as Tim's finishing up, I got about down to here, all flattened off. And while it's still wet, we want to do random patterns with the squeegee here. That way we don't have any like straight lines or anything. I'll kind of show you what we do. Same thing we do when we're doing concrete counters on our second coat. It'll give you a really cool mottled look after we do our scratch coat on it. So before I flatten this off, I'm gonna just start pulling. Random directions. Always starting from an edge. The texture, go different directions. Give it a really cool look. Now I'll flatten all this off and do the same thing. All right, so the majority's off of this. So I'll go through and do my random texture all the way down. That did good. Now I'm just gonna check, make sure I don't have any lines where maybe I put the squeegee down on it. Make sure everything's been coated.
We're going to now sand the wall. We've done 2 coats of texture coat, and now we're going to sand the wall with a palm sander. I'm using 40 grit, that's pretty rough. You can use anywhere from 40 grit all the way up to 100 grit to do this. And we're just gonna knock off all the tips and then get it ready for our scratch coat. Sanded the wall, and now what we're going to do is actually pull this tape on the ceiling and on this wall here, because you notice there's quite a bit of buildup. And so before we do our scratch coat, we want to just retape and put some fresh tape there. So when you're pulling this, I'll show you kind of a nice trick. You want to pull in large sections. So we'll just work this off the wall. And then you want to pull, again, in large sections, peeling up the overlay, and it should snap at the corner and come off. You can maybe work it a little bit. See, like that? This perfect crisp line. It should be a perfect crisp line like that. It just breaks right off. And it's because it was sticking on tape here and it was sticking on our prep replacement primer here. It sticks very well to that primer. So you don't really have to worry about it coming off the wall. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to pull this tape now while it's easier, and then retape and do the scratch coat, and it'll make it much easier to pull that later. And we may even hand sand this edge because it's a little bit sharp. So we may even hand sand this a little bit just to take the tip off.
Alright, so what I'm doing is just pre-hydrating, making sure I'm getting water in the corners. We've already hit the wall, a couple of dry spots, but I'm not worried about that. And then we're gonna do the same thing, start in the corner because we can't get a roller back in there. So I'm just gonna use that cheap paintbrush and a cup, get this started, and then we'll go to the roller. And this is our scratch coat, so it doesn't have any crushed marble in it, so it's gonna fill in all the low spots in the wall. Gonna just use a metal scraper. I'll work up, and I'm not really dripping it everywhere. So all I'm doing is just trying to make sure there's no lines from the scraper, and kind of filling in everything that I can, all the low spots from the texture coat.
Now it's time to pull the decal. Sometimes they can be a little bit of a pain with all of these layers, but that's why we put the filament tape on top to kind of help us. And we took a picture of the wall before we started the process just so we could reference it and remember exactly where we put the tape. So we're just gonna look for the first layer of filament tape. And then once we pull all of that, we will attempt to pull the decal. All right guys, as you can see, we ran into an issue that our primer that we rolled onto the wall is actually ripping off the top layer of sheetrock. So what we're going to do is rip off as much of this as we can. We're going to quit tearing it so that it doesn't continue to spread. We're going to attempt to patch it, feather it in, and then put a stencil and some more black on top of that. So instead of being recessed into the wall, it'll be set on top of the wall. Still very cool. So that's what we're going to work on now.
So you see how good it's stuck. I mean, even just doing a concrete wall, it's not like it's going to peel off. We're literally ripping off the drywall or even going into the actual sheetrock. So Obviously doing that sticky decal on here was the issue. So just scoring it, making sure I'm getting through. We're gonna get a nice square edge. And then we'll show you how to salvage this like some pros.
Okay, so now we cut out a square. Now we're going to fill this in with overlay, and we may scratch coat the whole wall again just to blend it into the whole wall. And then we're going to put our stencil on top of that. And so we're actually going to use prep replacement primer on this again because for obvious reasons, we know it does stick, but we just don't want to try to peel it this time. So we're gonna wipe this down really well, and then prep replacement primer, and then do a couple coats of overlay, possibly scratch coat the whole wall, then do the stencil on top.
All right, so I just finished the second coat. And since it's our second coat before the scratch coat, we're gonna make sure we're going random directions and finishing it off. So we get that random pattern. And you can kind of see it's all random up top where we kind of finished that one out. Okay, so I'm gonna sand this now because again, after our second texture coat, we sanded it and we're trying to match this. So I'm gonna sand the edges down flush and then I'll kind of buzz hit this because I don't want to sand this more than we did on here and have this a lot smoother. So we like this kind of rough look that it left. So I'm gonna try to keep that going, but I gotta sand these edges nice and flush. All right, so since we're gonna coat this one more coat and kind of feather this out to kind of hide the patch that we had to do, we want to tape off all the wood grain in the floor. Pre-hydrate this. They're mixing up the scratch coat right now. That way when I go to coat it, I don't have to spend a bunch of time and spray water. I can just kind of mix where I'm going. So I'll start on this left side. Reapplying the decal, only this time it's not a decal, it's a stencil. So we're gonna do the same process. We're gonna peel this back. And now, that's good.
I'm gonna try not to slice into the wall. Now I'm not gonna push it down very hard. I'm gonna mainly focus right around where the decal needs to go down. Now what we're gonna do is we're actually just going to really push down right on the edge. We're not so much going to try to push the whole entire stencil down. We're just gonna really focus on the perimeter so we don't get any bleed marks when we put the layer of concrete overlay on here. And the reason why we're not getting real crazy and going over the whole thing is because of the issue we had before. So obviously, this wall is a little bit sensitive to stuff like this, and we want to be careful of that. So, obviously, we want to salvage it and make it look amazing. Now that we have all the transfer paper pulled from our stencil, we're just going to go around the edge one more time, make sure it's pushed down really well. And once it's pushed down really well, we're going to take some blue painter's tape because you can see that the stencil doesn't go very far up. And we're just going to make sure we can't get any overlay on our finished wall. That's our priority now, is just making sure that we protect what's already done. Now we're going to plastic off underneath this logo again and coat the wall.
All right, so I'm gonna do the black on here. We're gonna do black texture, and then either sand it and do our scratch coat with black, or we might leave it, I don't know, we'll see. So I'm gonna start rolling this on, and then I'll just flatten it off with the squeegee.
Now we're going to sand the texture coat on the logo like we always do. Wipe it down real quick and then use the scratch coat.
Okay, scratch coat time. Sanded, hydrated. Now I'm gonna just roll some of the scratch coat on there, flatten it off with a metal scraper, and again, it's gonna fill in like the wall did here, nice and smooth. We'll get a little on there. And I'll just start working my way down. Kind of see how it seems a little wet. I'll let that set up a little and keep troweling it in because I want to get it flat like this.
All right, now we're going to get ready to pull the stencil, and we're going to pull it from the top down. So anything that's like hard and chunky is just going to fall on top of the plastic. So the first thing we're going to do
is remove this tape.
And then this tape.
And then this tape. I don't know if I'm tall enough.
You're tall enough. Just don't step in that black stuff you're stepping in.
Got it. Second step, don't step in the black stuff.
Let's see.
Oh. This looks so cool! I'm way too scared to help. I'll just support your guys' lower backs if you need to checks there. There you go, get it.
Right now what we're going to do is just clean up the edges. So I found some sandpaper that's already used. And we're just going to hit some of these edges that are real sharp.
Okay, so edges are cut in. Like I was saying before, had some people walk in and talk, but I'm cutting in, but I'm not being too careful because we're gonna be doing gloss over this when we do the floor, and that's when I'll take my time cutting in really nice. Because once we do gloss over the mat, it'll be glossy again, so I'm not really worried about that. Watching the video. Shout out to Shonders and the Space Station crew for the collaboration. We did a ton of cool projects with them, so click that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos.